Okay, we can begin.
All right, thank you all. Good afternoon. It is August 28th. It's just about 12:18 p.m. The Hawaii Task Force is about to meet, and I'm going to hand it back to the Hawaii Department of Agriculture to do your roll call and let the public know how they can participate via public testimony. And my name is Gail Byrne-Baber, Chair of the Task Force. Aloha.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm IT for Department of Agriculture. Let's see. For internet, telephone, and in-person access, when testifying, you will be asked to identify yourself and the organization, if any, that you represent. Each testifier will be limited to 2 minutes of testimony per agenda item. If internet and phone connection is lost, the meeting may reconvene when either audio-visual communication or audio-only communication is established within 30 minutes. The public may access the reconvened meeting by clicking the link in the agenda or calling one of the numbers also posted on the agenda. If it is not possible to reconvene the meeting within 30 minutes after an interruption, then check the agency's website for information as to whether the meeting will be continued to an alternative date and time, or the meeting may be terminated. For those of you joining via internet, as an attendee, your microphone will be automatically muted during the meeting unless you are providing testimony. For each agenda item you wish to testify on, please click the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen. The task force staff will individually enable each testifier to unmute their microphone. When recognized by the task force meeting facilitator, please unmute your microphone before speaking and mute your microphone after you are finished speaking in order to prevent audio feedback. There's any members of the public joining via phone, dial-in. When the task force meeting facilitator asks for public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering star and then 9 on your phone's keypad. After entering star and then 9, a voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the meeting facilitator, you may unmute yourself by pressing star and then 6 on your phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. Once you are finished speaking, please enter star and then 6 again to mute yourself. I also just wanted to remind everyone that unlike all the other meetings that ended at 2 p.m., this one will be ending at 1:30 because this room is being used for another meeting. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm June from HDOA. So we're going to get the attendance for today's meeting. So please say present when I call your name. So the task force members are as follows: Chair Gail Baber,
Present.
Robert Benz,
Present.
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 Can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's soft right now, Greg.
Oh.
Gloria Ilagan,
Stephen, I don't think folks heard all, or June, I'm sorry. I don't think everyone heard.
okay, sorry. I'll go back to Janine Holstein.
Yeah, thank you.
Janine, absent. Gloria Ilagan, absent. Kelly King, Kelly, absent. Kyle Leong, Kyle, absent. Professor Lee,
Present.
Michele Matsuda,
Present.
Jediah McRoberts, Jediah, absent. Liliana Napoleon. Absent. Brittany Neal. Brittany.
Is here, maybe just, hasn't unmuted herself.
Brittany? Where's Brittany?
She's here. Okay.
Maybe come back to her at the end.
Grant Alberton.
Here.
Greg Smith.
Here.
Rusty Top.
Here.
June, for some reason, the volume's fading.
Yeah, you just need to talk that way.
Brittany says she can hear, but she cannot unmute. So I don't know if there's a master unmuter over there in Oahu that can let her in. And she just texted me present. I don't know that that counts, but
Okay, I'll just, Scotty Wong.
Present.
Again, Britt, Neal.
Give it just a moment. I removed her and
She
brought her
cannot.
back in. She accepts.
She cannot hear. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 11 members present today. So a quorum is established. Think we have no one from the public in person attending today, but we have two,
There's one.
only one online.
Correct.
And so just to give some reminders, so we have public attending today. So testimony will be accepted on each item agenda and must address items on the agenda only. And the testimony is limited to 2 minutes. So the task force needs to have 10 members present to meet the quorum. If the task force loses quorum in the middle of the meeting, the discussion between members needs to be stopped immediately. The public can still provide testimony, but the task force may have to adjourn the meeting after that. We only have 3 meetings left, today, tomorrow, and on Friday. So the next 2 meetings should be focused around deciding which specific recommendations to include in the final report. I forwarded you the recommendations from put forward by Gail earlier. And if you did not receive it, please let me know. This includes in discussion on specific wording, format, etc. of the final report. The finalized report should be approved by a vote at the final meeting. The report needs to get the majority of all members on the task force. That is 10 members voting yes to be approved. After the task force approves the final report, the task force members, including the chair, cannot make any substantive revisions to the report, which includes changing any grammar or wordings. A small but not substantive changes to the report can be made after the meeting before end of business on August 30th. However, there is only limited to small formatting issues or clerical errors, like for example, fixing spelling mistakes. If substantive changes are made that are not approved by the task force, including changing any grammar or wording, the final report risks being invalidated. Lastly, the task force cannot make any decisions after the last meeting, including approving any changes to the final report that may be made. The Hawaii Hemp Task Force cannot meet again after the meeting ends on August 30th and is dissolved at the close of business on August 30th. Thank you. I'm turning it over to the chair.
Yeah, thank you, June. Thank you, Stephen. And thanks for those reminders of the looming deadlines. I'm gonna ask Andrew and Travis a question, but I don't need an answer now. I mean, you can provide one maybe later in the meeting. First of all, we all want to be done on Friday. I'm pretty sure of that because it's a lot of work. However, the July 1st deadline was, hi, Brittany.
Hi.
The July 1st deadline for the report being to the task force was somehow, it doesn't matter the reason why, but it wasn't met. So I'm just a little bit, I guess I want to understand the legal basis on why we couldn't have a few more days to wrap up the August 30th. It may be completely staff constraints, which I can understand, but I guess I'd want to understand the basis between that. And then we can get an answer later. We should probably just jump into what we're doing now. I mean, reviewing the sections.
No, I mean, it's a pretty simple answer. Like the July 1st deadline for the report and the task force deadline are two separate deadlines, right? So the consultant report deadline was July 1st. The task force in total dissolves on August 30th. So that is by statute. If you guys meet after that, it would not be an official task force meeting. And if you don't get a report approved or at least recommendations that come out of the task force by the 30th, you can't make an official recommendation. So that's just the mechanism. The two things are not really related.
Okay, all right, thanks for clarifying that. Okay, and then you did clarify for me the other day, non-substantive, what that means. And if we need to on the last day, I can have my screen up, sharing things and changing things so that everyone sees the words, and then I can change it in a Word document and send that later, as long as everyone during that meeting agrees to the changes. Okay. As always, open to everyone's feedback on how you think it's best for us to progress. What I'd maybe I'll save this for the ending because I didn't get it done. I want to discuss how I'd like to format the report. I'd like to put the majority of recommendations into tables. But since you don't have something to look at, it seems silly to discuss that in too much detail. So I want to save that for the end of the meeting. Because that might be something that's not done until Friday morning, given my work schedule and everything I'm juggling as well. And thank you all for juggling your schedules, everyone, agency folks, task force members. I know it's a lot to put in these last 10 days. If there is no objection, what I'd like to do is maybe start with the general, all sectors recommendations and findings. I didn't get all the recommendations done because there's a lot. I will get those out to you as soon as this meeting is over, but we can at least go over the general findings that apply to all sectors, unless someone wants to start with another sector, another item. Is there another pathway that folks would like to move forward with the meeting? Okay, if not, let's just go for it. Oh, and I do want to acknowledge that we have a member of the public, and we were supposed to offer an opportunity for testimony. I think Stephen made that clear. I do see that it's not a chat box, but in the question and answer box, that the member from the public identified themselves, and they said that they're joining for information and no testimony, no camera. So just wanted to put that on the record. And thank you, member of the public, for being there and caring about what we're doing. Okay, so jumping into general recommendations. Stephen, can I share my screen?
Yes.
Do you think that would be, I think that might be a more efficient way to proceed, if you don't mind.
Yeah, agreed. I've enabled screen sharing. So the bottom center of your screen, you should have like a share button.
Okay. Just make sure I get the right document. Okay.
We could,
So folks see this right here?
yes.
Okay, says all sectors fiber field findings. Okay. I don't want to read this verbatim. I hope you've had a chance to glance at it. What you can certainly send me individually, things like commas, missing poor grammar, whatever it is, minor edits. But what I'd really like to understand if there's overarching findings for these, for all sectors, for the hemp industry that I somehow didn't capture or miss. The recommendations are extensive that fall out of this, but I just want to make sure this is what we identified as affecting all our hemp sectors in Hawaii. So we talk about, does anyone first have anything to contribute? Otherwise, I'll just generally summarize them and we'll move on. I don't see anyone. I can't see y'all right now, given this view. So you'll have to speak up if you want to say something. I can't see hands raised. And Stephen or June, you can let me know if someone's got a hand raised. But I also encourage you just to unmute yourself. Okay, so what we're doing in the finding is identifying or stating the enormous potential for this crop and some of the things that are already existing here in terms of making Hawaii a more sustainable economy. It truly is almost like a once in a lifetime opportunity for ag here. We talk about the specific ways that it can further agriculture in terms of phytoremediation, regenerating soils, accelerating us towards larger scale ag, animal opportunities, and then the value added. Yeah, go ahead, Robert. I can't hear you, Robert.
Oh, sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm not sure if I have an echo there.
Oh, sorry.
The um the animal feed issue was brought up. I had sent in specific information on the animal feed, but I'm not sure if this is just a general, and that might be in a different area. Just
That's a really good question because there isn't a specific section that we identified just for animal. And I wonder where, should we do a brief section on that?
Yeah, definitely, because I'm a member of the Hemp Feed Coalition, and right now there's really no federally legal way to feed animals hemp. But I submitted some, I know you've overloaded by emails, but I submitted some specific information where the state can approve the AFCO tentative definition for laying hens, and they could do that, and it's pretty actionable thing that the state could do pretty easily. And then right now that would be the only animal feed. It would be the seed cake, but there's a lot of regulations that can kind of point to into the feed side. And the Kansas State University is doing some great research with feeding cows. So University of Hawaii could set up similar research, and that would enable us to feed it to cows.
Thanks, Robert. I remember as a young child being in the Midwest, and they used to call hemp ditchweed, and it used to be intentionally planted along some ditches for a variety of reasons, but and part of it was for feed, at the end of the summer or whatever the season, they'd let the cattle into it. But okay, so we will add, assuming there's a consensus here, a small section on applications for animals, which includes feed, I suppose, and well, bedding almost falls under fiber. I guess animal feed should be a standalone section then, Robert.
Animal feed has a lot of federal issues with it that bedding doesn't have, but it could be related, just it's more federal issues constricting the feed side.
Is the federal movement on feed only with regards to hens and chickens, or is it
It's
also?
only allowed for laying hens, and it just recently became only tentatively allowed. So the state would have to say that the state accepts AAF co tentative definitions. I sent an email about it a while ago,
Yeah, I was
but
just wondering if it also, I thought there was movement on cattle feed, but
yeah,
probably.
that is through Kansas State University. They're doing a lot of research,
Okay.
but it's still unfortunately in the research phase. So I think UH can be a huge overall partner, and they might be able to help us legally feed it to cattle, because I had the same um experience here in Kula and Kakaloa with ditches of what was hemp, which was then even different than cannabis.
Is the primary recommendations around here, falling out of that section then would be the adoption of the AFCO rules, and then potentially some UH research. I mean,
Yeah.
in general, we've recommended cultivar research. Is there anything beyond that? Can you be more specific on the research opportunities? I'm sure they're enormous.
Yeah, I think I sent an email. I can send another email with more specific, but there is a Kansas State University we can replicate and probably work with their they'll probably be happy with a partnership if the UH CTAR can have livestock extension agents work with hemp farmers to produce hemp for animal feed and test the nutritional and safety of the hemp feed. It's weird because you would imagine pets are okay, but as far as livestock, it's really the only thing that's not currently federally legal is if we press out oil from hemp seed and we want to feed that seed cake to livestock. Right now, you have to have the state accept the tentative AAF co definition for laying hen being, and you have to do all of that. So it's a pretty regulated federal market is the livestock feed
Mhm.
versus the bedding doesn't have those pitfalls, but
Yeah, no internally.
we work with the university, we can have a lot more flexibility of what we feed our livestock because that's a big part of real regenerative agriculture is crop rotation and integrating of the livestock.
True. Okay, we'll add that new section. And yeah, thanks, Robert. If you can help me be concise in another email, that'd be great. All right, anything else on animal feed? Okay, well, we'll add that as a separate potential product up here in the overall general section.
I
And
wonder if microgreens is too
ah,
specific for that section, but the microgreens right now is being held up by the Hawaii Department of Ag, the movement reports.
well, you know that that brings us to another very flimsy section, which is food. The consultant's report was pretty narrow on that, and the primary information I have, I'm drawing on a grant that Doug Fine and I drafted a couple of years ago to do small, I call it grain, but small farmer production of food seed. So if anyone has additional recommendations or findings for that sector, I'd be very grateful for any input on that. So so your question or your statement, Robert, was, should we add that to here? Because I think you're right, because what's missing from here is, so I'm talking about moving agriculture forward, so we could talk about the food aspects of that. I need to add a paragraph there. Thank you.
Yeah, I can send more information. It's still pending. I don't think we got it, but I applied for an RSFI grant, and I put a lot of focus on the food section and supplying the schools.
Oh, great.
Rusty Tap has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Rusty.
Hi, Rusty Tapp here from Combine Ventures. Thanks, everyone. The issue came up about food and how it could relate to hemp. I personally am endeavoring to build a diverse farm where we would intend to grow edible food crops. For example, lilikoi. Lilikoi would be made to like juice or syrups or that sort of thing, concentrated. I intended to build an ag processing facility to support all these types of agricultural processing endeavors, from lilikoi to microgreens to hemp. And a big concern came up for me when I was submitting engineered designs for a building that includes a food prep area, because based on my reading of the policy, realized that hemp would require something similar, if not exactly that. It can't be processed in a residence. So a commercial building and a food safe prep area is sort of like the only, designated building design and use that I could pursue for an ag processing facility that would incorporate hemp. But the local food and health department official notified me that if I were to choose to process hemp in the building, that it would preclude me from processing food. And I mean, that was a big concern for me because, again, my plans are diverse. I figure if hemp, due to regulations or other issues economic wise, wouldn't be sustainable, that I would automatically, and maybe even at the same time, begin to pilot some other food products. So it is, I believe, in encumbering investment into what we know is required for local food, which is processing facilities. And I just think it should be, we shouldn't be limiting hemp from being processed in places where we process food, because I think that's kind of what we need to safe handling for the processing of hemp. And I think it's silly to have separate spaces required, because hemp is an agricultural product. It's not a controlled substance. And I think Hawaii is within its means and in its incentives to support it by using existing food safe facilities for processing hemp, and to allow for newly built food processing facilities to also incorporate hemp. Thank you.
That's an excellent point. I know DOH has brought this up because we specifically added food hubs to Act 263 to allow for processing of cannabinoids, but DOH has rightfully reminded us that we need to make sure that by us processing for cannabinoids, we're not talking about grass, generally accepted products like hemp seeds for eating, that we make sure that we aren't in any way going to upset the food processing folks that might be using those same facilities. So I guess my question to you is, what type of hemp were you going to process there? And was it for seed? Because that's already generally recognized as safe. And I can't imagine, I mean, maybe just this local official didn't know that you were, or was it for a lease for microgreens or?
Well, I intend to look at cannabinoids. That's the most robust sector, of course. But my thinking as an entrepreneur is to explore in other areas, especially as the plant may be conducive to growing seed. If I'm experimenting with a certain varietal that I would like to produce seed with. So I think it's kind of an insane level of regulation to like require me to process seed in a separate facility that I would process my cannabinoid rich hemp in as well. These are just things that I think are impeding investment and progress in the hemp sector. And if we're talking about hemp sector as sort of a buttress to the food sector, I think we should be encouraging farmers like myself who are interested in investing in infrastructure like this to allow for as many uses as possible. I mean, that generally supports the sustainability of a business, especially in a new industry or newer industry where market fluctuations can disrupt an operation. So really about having, the flexibility. I mean, I think that's what businesses need a lot of times, is to sometimes have flexibility to say, we wanted to process some cannabinoids, and we turned, and as it turns out, we actually do better processing hemp seed for oil or something. But if we can't experiment in the facility that we build without having to labor through regulations, and then also in generally the tone and the attitude from the health department was more of restrictive. I was in several phone conversations with an agent, and it was like as if I was talking to him for the first time every time. So it wasn't necessarily, in my opinion, a good faith conversation being had, but it was also just sort of overbearing in the attempt to sort of dissuade an entrepreneur's attempt to process what's, again, a non-controlled agricultural product in an ag processing facility where other products would be processed. And I think if we go down to that granular level of regulating hemp like that, I think that we're doing ourselves generally a disservice.
I want to echo what you're saying, because a lot of us cannabinoid farmers are food farmers. I mean, we polycrop. Our hemp has been grown right next to our chard, our greens, our culinary herbs, and there's a lot of great reasons for doing that. So I want to ask DOH a question real quick. But first of all, what you're talking about with regard to, and I'm assuming these are local health officials, not necessarily at the state level. So one of the recommendations, the general recommendations that applies to all sectors, is a letter that would be issued by the state to a variety of folks, financial institutions, insurance people, but it could also include counties, that says, look, hemp is legal. Here's the ways that it is legal, to kind of remove that. Sometimes there's still a lot of personal bias, and I'm not saying that's what's happening in your case with the person you're working with, but to kind of provide those assurances to people that may feel uncomfortable or might put up unnecessary filters or hurdles to jump through. So that recommendation was put forth by the task force, that this letter go out from our agencies of the AG office blanketly out there. That's basically the state is taking a position that hemp is legal and we need to support this. With regard to processing in a facility that you're going to own, I find that interesting. And let's get Greg up here, because I think as long as you're meeting food safety requirements and have a food safety handling plan, and the spaces are a little bit separated, I mean, you're not going to use the same equipment to process cannabinoids as you are for washing and bundling seeds. So for food, so that's a little bit odd to me. So is basically the health official saying you need like separate rooms or even totally separate buildings to do this? Just to clarify before we ask Greg for some help.
Yeah, every impression I have is that the building would be only permitted to be used for processing hemp if you choose to go the hemp processing designation route, which would again preclude you from using the building to process food. So for instance, if I were to go, build a facility, process hemp in it, and then I find like a food truck vendor who needs a commissary kitchen for dishwashing, I wouldn't be allowed to diversify my, use by allowing a short-term lease for a food vendor, for instance, to make a revenue stream while a hemp business model is still not very clear. So
Yeah.
these are all, yes, limiting the ability for us to build infrastructure, and that's a big problem. We won't make a hemp product until we have a hemp processing facility, and the Department of Health has made it quite difficult to do that. I mean, even using language such as, not using heat or pressure. I mean, that's just a little bit ambiguous, because I think, heat is a very, very general word. And most processes could require heat. I mean, to be honest, solvents like water is a solvent. You know what I mean? Like at some point when you do have sort of like local officials, like you say, with that may have a bias on a substance like hemp because of its relation to cannabis, that they would basically nitpick you to a level that makes doing the business very unappealing. And I mean, I think Kelly King, or if that's her name, Mrs. King, referred to that when she talked about like the barbed wire fencing detail or the gauge of the wire and so on and so on, like 500 feet of buffer zone as opposed to 100 feet. Really, truly, I think it's important at this point for hemp farmers to understand where the roadblocks are, and some of these things can't be moved by the state. Certain federal problems remain at the federal level, and I do believe that, as we've noticed on this panel, the cannabinoid farmers do represent a large group of small farms, and the small farmer potential for this crop, that our voices should be taken very seriously if in honesty we're looking to support the diverse economy of agriculture in Hawaii. That's it. Thank you.
Those are important things. And Robert, I'm going to call on you in just a second, but I just want to clarify some of the things you mentioned about processing with regard to solvent, heat, and pressure. That's mentioned in state statute, I think 328, and specifically with regard to exemptions if you're in an agricultural building. But if these are additional requirements the local folks are putting on you, I think they have to be aligned with state requirements. So I'm going to ask Greg. Is Greg from DOH there today?
He's not.
Oh, he's not. Bummer. Okay. So what we'll do, we'll send an email to him, Rusty, because I don't think from the state's level we'll have it clarified, and maybe Andrew can clarify this for us. But from the state's perspective, I think as long as you meet the requirements that they identify for processing hemp, they don't require it to be a standalone building that you can't do anything else in. So we'll get that
These are
clarified.
separate.
What's that?
I'm pretty sure Greg or somebody from the Department of Health mentioned previously at a task force meeting what I believe they're giving Rusty the hard time about is you might have a machine that is somewhat involved, or a storage unit, something that's pretty integral to your whole processing facility, that might be used somewhat for a CB product versus a grass product.
Yeah.
And they said that because of FDA rules, they don't want to allow the combination of regular food. So they were saying like it might be a problem even with the food hubs, like the innovation center we have over here. Because if I say use a bottling plant that they have, and that bottling plant is a grass product like hemp oil, but it's infused with CBD oil. According to my understanding of this HDOH from the last previous task force meeting, the presence of that CB oil would make that not compatible with
That's
food.
true, Robert. That's for shared facilities though, and I think it is incumbent upon cannabinoid users of
Pretty
shared.
sure they were saying it was based on an FDA rule that CBD it's a pharmaceutical product. THC is a pharmaceutical product. They don't believe that they can allow them into food. That's what my understanding. So it wasn't I was just using the facility as an example, but that's why my original question to them is why we were placed under OM CCR instead of placed under FSB. And that's why they said we couldn't be placed under FSB.
Okay, well, it seems to me though, we need some clarification in writing on that, because when I look at the hemp processor application that I picked up, it doesn't say anything about that. There's no, so why don't we get that from Greg? Because from our conversations about food hubs was, you just have to make sure you're not impacting the user.
Yeah,
And so that might be, yeah, you can't use their bottling equipment, but in Rusty's case, it's his own facility.
I'm almost positive that we're talking about them. Their interpretation of FDA rule is that that's what they were telling me, even for the microgreens, that I have to get it with pretty much no CBD, no
Okay.
THC, or even for personal. I think the failure to having that on the rules is why we need to have more of a cooperative and educational health department, which is one of Rusty's every part of Rusty's point. I couldn't echo more. I think that's the main issue here. We all know that the state's interpretation of rules has been unfortunately very unfriendly to farmers and to processors, and that's why people don't farm, people don't process.
Yes, thanks. I would just like to clarify the building plans I submitted to the state for a hemp processing license. They approved and issued the hemp processing license. And it was at that time that I decided to proceed, to pay for engineering, which was tens of thousands of dollars. And it took over a year for the plans to finally move through the county. And it was at that point that some of these rules appeared to have changed. And during that time, the information from our local health official in Hilo was very rough against, the idea of just processing hemp. It was a lot like convincing somebody that it's illegal, commodity, and so that was really rough, because it did feel like the burden to educate our local health official should have been handled by the health department, but that he was sort of out of the loop.
I feel like, well, I know this is like really critical, important discussions here. I feel like in some ways we've started to narrow down into the cannabinoid sector a little bit. But you started out with kind of overarching infrastructure issues, right? So is there a way for us to make sure I tie this back into the overall sectors? We'll make sure everything you're saying, Rusty, is addressed in the cannabinoid section if it's not already.
Yeah.
But
Go.
Yeah, and to relate that to the broader, it had to do with food, right?
Yes, right. That's it. To tie it to food, it's about processing centers. The closer the food is being grown to the processing center, we've all talked about this is what part of sustainability is, and food security. So in all these remote parts of the Big Island, for example, Puna, Ka'u, Kohala, they need processing facilities nearby. Some farms would want it right next to them. And like you said, those same farmers are also food farmers. And so just not encumbering their progress, but actually maybe supporting it would be great, but even just not encumbering it would lead to more food processing facilities, which will support local food. And yeah, hemp is just a crop like any other. It could be. That's how we should be looking at it, in my opinion. It's doesn't have an extra promise until we realize that promise. Like we talk about the promise of hemp, but until we actually remove the barriers and explore it, we're just talking about it. The reality is that the $28 billion a year hemp sector is related to cannabinoids. The food and fiber and grain sectors are very small compared to the cannabinoid sector today. And you've brought this up, the $52 million a year spent in Hawaii on hemp derived products. Those are all the low hanging fruit. And so it is important to talk about the overall picture with hemp and its many, many uses. But it's clear that like the Department of Health isn't obstructing the food, fiber, and grain sectors of the local hemp industry, but they're there to impede the progress of the cannabinoid sector. And so I do think it's worth highlighting that as we talk about the big broad picture. There's only one sector that's actually being stifled by the health department, and the other sectors they're just stifled by their own lack of innovation and capital that they've mustered. Other states, other universities are going for those grants. We're working with the UH Hilo all the time, but they're obtuse to hemp. It's like pulling teeth to get them to think about it or have a good faith conversation about cannabis. So those are what I see as like the main inhibitors to the large, broad sector of hemp. And then the Department of Health specifically, and its unique interpretations of the federal restrictions or guidelines that differ from a state like Minnesota, for instance, are what impede our local cannabinoid sector. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I would say that probably we all agree with you. And the only place of departure would be that all our sectors have been impeded here. It's not just a lack of innovation or going for funds. I mean, we have been hogtied in terms of, even if we had the grants, we couldn't even move the hemp off our farm for a long time. Even if we had the grants, we couldn't buy seed from anyone on the mainland. We had to go source it off. Even if we had grants or we were innovative, we were saddled with incredible security issues. So, a lot of that is tackled down here in the excessive regulations kind of, and I'd love people to add to this what we face, because we go to the legislature every year and we talk about, hey, we've had excessive regulation, you about killed us. And I almost feel like they kind of almost roll their eyes at this point, because maybe it sounds like whining, but when you start to look at the specific examples of what has happened to the Hawaii hemp industry across all sectors, not just cannabinoids, compared to every other state, it's absolutely devastating. And so, I guess we all agree with what you're saying, and I think it applies to all sectors as well. And make sure, Rusty, thank you for all this. Then we go through the cannabinoid section, whether we have time today or not, as a group, but it's certainly individually. Make sure we've captured everything you've said in there. And then if I haven't captured in this too, please suggest specific wording.
I could just only echo what Rusty said, because I don't believe there's a single farmer on this task force that wouldn't or already hasn't been primarily focused with CB, because that's where the market is. And I agree with what you said, and that just shows that although we do CB because that's where the potential market is, really the herd, the fiber, that's a byproduct of a successful CB market. And my regulation, I guess it's what he said, there have a very anti-hemp, and I'm preaching to the choir to you, you very much know it, and he's right, like the health department isn't really stopping any of the grass. I don't even have a problem with them with microgreens or any food product, but they're very not helpful with hemp. And the same health department is allowing federally illegal Schedule I cannabis and not as concerned about how they are of that FDA interpretation of not mixing CB hemp with grass hemp or CB hemp with other foods, which is a really big problem right now. But yeah, I guess that should be a kind of a highlighted big problem because CB hemp can also be grown in fields mechanized. That was the only thing, and that one thing I know there's several large scale CB hemp farmers, and it really is the one that'll drive up all of the other sectors, at least for now, if we had more freedom. All
The money is, there's also the opportunity for the state, especially with the rebuild on Maui, to throw down big for potentially the fiber industry. I mean, there's big chunks of change floating around, so I don't want to dismiss that potential that's
I
out there.
don't separate them. I would grow for the fiber industry. I would still grow it as CB, and I would still harvest the flower. I don't see anybody just all the hemp is a byproduct. I don't see anybody just growing it for herd.
Okay. Thank you both. That's a really important discussion. I'll amend this general section to include your comments and also the cannabinoid section. In terms of an overview of findings for all sectors, and we talk about the potential to move the economy, to move agricultural significantly. I need to adjust these numbers. The value of what it is out there and how we are well positioned given our own growing season, and branding, if we want to focus on exports, how critical it is because we've lost so many farms and acres of land in the last 5 years, according to the USDA census. And then hitting home on those things that are hitting us all, the regulatory flux, it changes every year. Examples of the excessive regulation that's crippling us, including the new proposed rules that we at least have verbally heard about from DOH, are included in this excessive regulation. And then restrictive access to banking and loss of insurance, despite the 2019 Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act, or SAFE, of which Maui part-time resident Micah Nelson was very instrumental in passing and making sure hemp was a big component of that. Shout out to Micah. And then maybe this is too pointed, but I did give an example of a communication that Bo Whitney, who's been an advocate for Hawaii, but is also the leading hemp and cannabis economist really in the world, travels all over doing assessments for countries and different governments, and why he's abandoned bringing a 200 million fiber project to Hawaii, kind of explains it in very basic economic terms. So just to kind of drive the point home that we really need to address these issues up here. Is there anything else in terms of findings that's affecting all sectors? You know what I just realized is it's the varietals in the research as well. Grant, I don't even know if he's on there, but he's talked about that a number of times, and I'm going to add that. I just realized that another major hang up, I'll put it here. This is not where it should be, but varietals that are not conditioned, but specific to Hawaii's unique environments and photo periods. Hasn't completely stopped us on the cannabinoid end because we got some phenomenal breeders here in Hawaii who have decades of experience with plants, but it is a challenge. So I'm adding that unless there's a reason not to, is a major overarching impact. Because that affects building, that affects cannabinoids. Any other overarching, Robert, you have your hand up still, or is that new?
This is
just-
new. I was thinking the need for labor that Greg mentioned is overarching. You already mentioned one of the things that I was gonna mention, and that was a good summary of the need. Maybe
Thank you.
grants. Having grants for both of labor and the seeds. The other thing is the movement reports and buffer zones, getting rid of those.
Okay, I put those in here. The buffers are an example in here, but I'll add movement reports. I said we couldn't move our off farm, but the movement reports still stand. Okay, I'll add that. as
To
an example.
really remove the movement reports and remove the buffer zones so that DOA can just focus on helping farmers.
Yeah, so the cures to all these findings are in the recommendations. Okay, any other significant findings affecting all sectors? All right, please forward to me via email, anything else you see in this particular section that needs to be addressed, and I will get to you the recommendations, which are quite a few that address these findings, shortly after today's, meeting is concluded. So why don't we tackle, I think we lost Grant. We don't have Kelly on the line. But if there are any general, or if there's any comments with regards to the fuel and biomass sector, I know you guys just got it this morning. It's been refined to what was put out there by the consultants. Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Robert.
on the biofuel section, because that is kind of part of my business on that one. We're flying to Spain next month to look at a biodigester unit to bring into Hawaii, that can convert hemp and multiple, bio feedstock into multiple fuels. I think the numbers when you mentioned the recommendations for grants are probably a little bit too low on those. I'd probably just raise them more, only because we're actively into the research, the data, and the actual the developing of these biodigesters, new state of the art ones. But those grants are, the grants are for like small farmers. We're actually a little bit bigger than that, especially with Agripelago and Pacific Biodiesel and the rest of those guys. But that's
Scott-
like my own.
Oh, sorry.
Looks good on.
Yeah, I'm just throwing numbers out there. So I'm glad you brought that up. So, and one of the things that Kelly brought up was trying to find that balance between what the state would support and feasible in the short term, and then what the true needs are. I know the true needs out there are significant in terms of funding. And in my mind, I was kind of mimicking some of the SBIR funding that's out there. What if this looks too low for like a phase 1 and phase 2? Can you, I don't know that the state's gonna fund everything, because obviously we're looking for public-private partnerships, but maybe I'm wrong about that assumption. That's my bias creeping in this report. So I need that to be corrected if it's not correct, or certainly if it doesn't represent the group. What would you think would be applicable?
I think that the numbers you have there are good for small farmers looking to do small scale in the biofuel. But I mean, if you're going to do biofuels, why would you go small scale? Unless it's for personal use. Like we have a system from eFuels. Tom Quinn, one of our partners, he has a system that's probably maybe 20 feet by 4 feet that converts green waste into ethanol, and you're allowed by law to use ethanol for personal use. I don't know what the exact gallons are, but those kind of systems is good for that scale. But if you're looking at biodiesel to support HECO or SAF or whatnot to get into that industry, which we are, you need at least a minimum 500,000 to start, up to a $3 million grant. And there are grants that are out there. I think the EPA, I believe it was the EPA or USDA. I forgot. I was posting it a month ago. I think they put $64 million towards a hempcrete grant for a company. So that's big money, in grants. to do
I
hemp
hear
work.
you. And these amounts also came from a conversation with Grant in terms of thinking what might be feasible for the state to provide. And what you're giving us is what the actuality is. Of course, Archipelago and your company would need a lot more. So doesn't hurt to ask if what I'm hearing is for large facilities, we need to identify more. We can,
And that's why I was in agreement with the consultant's recommendations that if the state is going to build something similar to the value added facility in Wahiawa, and they're going to do 2, maybe 3 facilities that would be funded by the state, run by a chosen company, like how they chose, I think, West Oahu or whoever the people that are running the value added. Then that way the big money can come through the state and let the state jump through all the hoops and regulations to provide that type of facility. And the CBD stuff is all good, but I am solely feed, fuel, fiber, and food. I don't mess with the CB side. So the thing is with this processing plant, a decorticator and some machines to cold press, for biodiesel and whatnot. Some that the state would probably look into putting that big money down for. I think it would be a lot easier to push forward rather than, I guess giving the grants to, organizations that do qualify for it. But we are trying. I'm going on national levels for that kind of funding. Or we do have private investors, or a lot of it comes out of our own bank account to do that.
yeah, I know, initially when we talked about putting this infrastructure report in the legislation, it was to foster private-public partnerships. I also see the value in the pathway for the larger facilities through the state. I don't think it's either or. I think, like you said, Scotty, it can be a dual pathway, but I am hearing that we need to raise the grant amounts to some of what you suggested. And then
Yeah, I think the dual approach is great. The small farmers and grants that way, and then let's something on the bigger scale, so that we can definitely go big, and let's see if the state can pull the trigger on that one. If not, yeah, it's private public partnerships. We're game for that too. So
and then
however
dual
that can-
is mentioned more in the because the big I guess reflecting back on the consultant's report, and I haven't finished the fiber building section, but that was where the dual pathway was going to be more discussed, the big facility needs, because I was thinking that fuel biomass areas are pretty well developed and they just need some funding. But I'm hearing that to open the door for potentially other projects, larger funding is also needed in the biomass fuel sector.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, thank you. I think I've got it, and you can always clarify with me later. I don't know who had their hand up first, but I don't think Brittany's spoken yet today, so go for it, Brittany.
Brittany, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, great. So I wanted to touch back on the need for increased research and development with regards to varietals that will do well in Hawaii and meet all of our needs, and also, be suitable for the pests we have and the weather, etc. And so one of the things that I think, obviously, access to varietals is something that affects all of the different sectors of hemp. But an issue that I see, and it's kind of a touchy one, I'm not exactly sure how to navigate it, but a lot of times when you identify a particular strain or varietal that you want to grow, there might be restrictions on being able to then take cuttings or grow seeds from that, which then further impedes our ability to develop strains and varietals that would be even better suited for Hawaii. And so somehow to incorporate the need to have a lot of people breeding different varietals in different microclimates across the state into this need for increased research and development, whether that be through UH or what, I feel like that would really allow us to grow so much more, so much faster to have that access and freedom for people to breed. I noticed I'm a sugarcane farmer as well, and I noticed that, I could have multiple acres of one variety of sugarcane, and every once in a while it will throw this unique clump of sugarcane, and it's like, wow, that one is so disease resistant, or that one is 4 to 5 inches a stalk. Like, this is amazing. And so if we can't do anything, because we happen to stumble across this really great outlier within this pool of plants that we're growing, and we can't then make cuttings, grow it out for seed, etc., we lose that. And that's something that is even more adapted to our environment. And so I'm not sure how to incorporate that into, the need for more access to varietals and continued research and development, without also stepping on the toes of the people who want intellectual property rights. So if anybody has suggestions regarding that, I would love to hear them. But I really do feel like that would be so huge for this industry moving forward, is to have a lot more freedom in that department as each individual farmer.
Yeah, would it be fair to characterize that as more open source versus the restrictive? Yeah, I know that stuff kind of drives me nuts too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
want to real fast reminder that we have the hard stop in 5 minutes. I see a lot of hands, so I just want to.
Oh, we're done at 5. Oh, I thought we went till 2 o'clock.
No, today is 1:30.
Oh, God. Okay, well, my apologies then on managing the time of the meeting. Let's go Scotty, then Robert. Can we extend this? Because there's been times where we extended a little bit longer, and I would love it if we go 15 minutes longer.
There's another meeting in this room at.
I gotcha. All right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll pay more attention to the timing, I guess, in the future. Go ahead, Scotty.
I might be real quick on Brittany's case, and I know Grant has mentioned it a couple of times. We're 70 days into our seed breeding grow on our 2-acre test plot right now, and we're doing all the R&D ourselves for a strain that is specifically for Hawaii. And we did have Hart come take a look at our plot and give us advice. They were going to be part of the grow, but I didn't think hemp. I forgot what the conversation was, but hemp didn't fit into their mission. But they did have a lot of experience on the actual breeding of seeds, because you guys know who Hart is. And then CTAR also came down and gave their advice. So we're 70 days into a test breeding for a new genetics for Hawaii, and our partners are a Chinese-based seed, which is one of the largest seed distributors in the continental United States right now, and their scientists are on it, along with the U.S.-based hemp seed growers that we're partnered with. So, just to give some context, that we're already into developing those seeds in the R&D, and yeah, and we're $80,000 into the test breeding. So yeah, grants are good for that. We need that.
And they are. And you know what, that reminds me, in terms of background, there's been a lot of seed breeding that happened during the hemp pilot program, and also with Greg and some folks before then. So we can at least provide that as background, mention that there are, that there has been stuff going on, and there is stuff going on.
And as far as like any of those genetics that are open source, Scotty, will the genetics that you're working on be open source?
Yeah, for us, when we grow, I mean, it's not proprietary. It's going to be for all of Hawaii. The big thing is to push for Hawaii. to be able to have access to these seeds.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's music to everyone's ears. Thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
Time's short, so I won't get started on seeds, but I remember that Kelly is against grants on the large scale, and she's the only really one that's done large scale production and large scale. She built a huge company with huge production. So I think she has a good point because the consultant's report of having one big expensive processing facility at $6 million or something, it'll be way easier just to simplify the grants and make it more general, but ask for more money. Just ask for $500,000 grants, and you can have your $500,000 grant. You could spread it out against 10 people, and that would have the most issue and most impact for the state.
Well, can we do both? I mean, we haven't even talked about the building sector, so that'll come up tomorrow, but I'm just thinking that if there's an opportunity for a chunk of change to be out there, we can say, you know, great, if someone wants to do this, this is essentially what it cost. Otherwise, here's some grants that are kind of in a feasible range that we expect to be, that could be let.
I really think asking for $500,000 grants, you can ask for so much more versus one big grant. And the only really proven large scale producer, she said that she's got this tax credit that can keep it more local. I think that because once you really get big, you don't really need grants, and $500,000 for all the other sectors except for a large scale processing can really be a big difference. But a large scale processing, that's just a small drop in the bucket.
Okay, we're gonna have to, I don't know that there's necessarily disagreement here. I'll try to find a way to write this up, but we'll have to be able to resolve this by Friday. Or at least come up with strategies that make sense to everyone around funding. There's a lot to cover in the cannabinoid section. We're not going to get to any of that, but we've already talked that one into the ground almost. We're out of time. Boy, time flies when you're having fun, I guess. So what I really highly encourage you guys to do, anything you've said that is of importance to you, please send me an email on it. I've got tons of notes. I've re-listened to meetings and I've captured a lot in sections that you guys haven't even seen yet. But as you can see, even today, sometimes I miss things. It's super helpful to get the emails, and then it really is I guess a dish that's had many hands on it, already has. Anything else before we wrap up from anyone that you feel is urgent or housekeeping? I just want to thank you all for your dedication, and especially those of you that are still here that are showing up meeting after meeting, because it's not necessarily fun. It's a grind, but I'm hopeful that the result will be something that we can use, that's usable, and will further this industry. So thank you. And we're meeting tomorrow. What's the time tomorrow? Is June there?
Yes, he's here. I can answer that real fast.
Yeah. Just make sure.
Tomorrow is noon to 2, and Friday is noon to 2.
Okay, well, keep an eye out in your inbox for the general recommendations day tomorrow morning. Hopefully before the meeting, I'll have the building sector to you. The new animal section, and the last one was food. So so we can have discussion on that before we gear up for our final discussion on Friday. And there you go. Appreciate all your help.
Yeah.
Do we need to move to adjourn, or can we just?
Correct, I believe you do.
So if there's no objection, we will now adjourn the meeting. So this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, DOA, for all your support. Aloha.
Uh,